Oh, it's streaming live. Goodness. Okay.
Progress.
We already have around 20 participants here.
Yep.
So we'll wait for another 2 minutes and then join. Yeah, we can start another 5 minutes. It's 4-5 we will start off while we have other people joining in. Yeah.
Sure.
I think we are good to go and we can start off. Siddesh?
Yes.
Asmita?
Yes, yes.
Yes, ma'am.
So
Siddesh,
I'll
you
just start? Or...
Yeah. No.
Yeah,
Give us the pleasure of introducing you, Tori.
Okay, thank you everybody who's here or who's going to watch this. My name is Tori Robinson. I'm based in the UK, London in the UK. And I'm going to be talking about what it has been like in my experience going from a person with an epilepsy and then additionally to be a global advocate for people affected by the epilepsies. And yep, so that's me on the front. And just some disclosures. So I'm the host of Epilepsy Sparks Insights. I'll talk a bit more about that later. I'm the founder and CEO of Epilepsy Sparks. And I've got a lot of involvement. I'm PPI lead or patient public involvement lead and researcher for multiple studies and projects. Also governor of South London and Maudsley Trust. It's a psychiatric hospital and trust in Southeast London. And I get bored of the UK. So, oh, if I go back there, sorry. I get bored of the UK, so you can see I'm working with Portugal, Belgium, Canada directly, and I'll speak more about my work with India soon. So these are my research roles. And then I just want to...
Sorry to interrupt. Sorry. So from my side, I just want to say that Tori is the heart behind the Epilepsy Sparks.
Yeah.
And with epilepsy herself, she has transformed her own challenges into a mission to uplift others. And you can see that she speaks openly, honestly, and courageously about her journey, which is a which turns a stigma into a strength and uncertainty into empowerment. She connects people across the world. You are advised to look at her Epilepsy Sparks Insight, and you will see that she connects with people and they share their stories, expert insights, and gives out hope. This passion, this resilience, and this authenticity, Tori, it's so lovable, and we are so much proud. Indian Academy of Neurology, the outreach section, myself and Siddesh, and across all of our members, we are proud to have you here and speak about your journey, which is very powerful and very purposeful. Thank you so much, Tori. You might begin your journey about how you have transformed from a person with epilepsy being a global advocate.
Well,
Thank you.
I've tried. It certainly wasn't the plan. How I started was I'd had temporal lobectomy, and then I found epilepsy charities. This is after over 30 years with an epilepsy. And then I was just shocked at how little people with an epilepsy knew about epilepsy. It was just wild to me. And so I started a blog, and then to just try and educate people. And then that morphed over time into Epilepsy Sparks. And then I started the podcast 4 years ago, 4 years ago, where I interview clinicians and researchers to try and bridge the gap between people with the epilepsy, between caregivers, and between researchers and clinicians, because we're stuck in these silos. I think it's very old-fashioned. We really needn't be there. And also, research is exciting, right? And let's face it, people with epilepsy or affected in any way need to have something positive to focus on. So then that's what I'm trying to achieve. And if anybody wants to tune in for free, it's on YouTube, it's on podcast. We have the transcription on my website. And this year, we're going to actually have some interviews regarding pharma as well. So that's another bridge I'm trying to make between the people with the epilepsy and then who's manufacturing the goods and med tech as well. Okay.
Excellent.
So, and sorry, go on.
Excellent. So absolutely.
Very interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
So thank you. Please interrupt me. I didn't know if you wanted me to just go through the slides or have a conversation.
Yeah,
So
I suppose you could play your slides, Tori, and then some housekeeping announcement that whosoever has questions to Tori, kindly put them in the chat box.
Yeah.
And some of them have already sent some as a personal question to me as well to ask you. So then we will be having questions at the end of your talk, Tori.
okay, great. All right. So I really wanted to share this slide specifically because it's commonly believed that someone who's just a patient just takes medication and that's it. I know that's not going to be the case for people listening and watching now, but that is generally the case. And I just wanted to show that you can be a researcher and author as somebody with an epilepsy if you go about it the right way. And you'll see from the list of papers this year that we're talking about women of childbearing age. There's stuff about the mental health disorders and how they can be worse than having seizures. We're talking about artificial intelligence and also talking about SUDEP or sudden unexpected death in epilepsy. So I've kind of said some of this already, but why I'm here today, I find the epilepsies fascinating. And I'm trying to empower people through education, as I said, and encourage other people affected by the epilepsies. Even some people with degrees of intellectual disability, I include them in my work. It's really important. And you can probably tell I'm very passionate about this. And I guess part of that is because I wish that I'd had somebody to look up to or to turn to when I had epilepsy. I said had epilepsy. I still have epilepsy, but I mean growing up with epilepsy. So just for people who aren't familiar, we have over 65 million people worldwide affected by with an epilepsy. I sometimes suspect it's more actually, because we're over 8 billion people now. And if we have at least 1 in 100 people affected by the epilepsies, I know it's more in some countries like India, then that doesn't equate to 65 million, does it? But looking at formal sources, they say 65 million. And the treatment gap remains significant, largely in low to middle income countries, but even actually in some high income countries. And the access varies by geography, like where you're based. Your culture often is a huge, huge issue. Is epilepsy going to be accepted? And then therefore, will you accept treatment? The education about it, your socioeconomic status. That's even a case in the UK, for instance, that's proven. There's empirical evidence showing that if you are of lower income, then you're less likely to get help for your epilepsy. And then also very important, and you'll notice this pattern when I'm talking, I'm very keen on communicating that epilepsy is not just seizures. That's commonly said, but it's not. We look at the epileptogenesis, the start of the epilepsy, that often is correlates with not just seizures, but depression, anxiety, and even sometimes other things like psychosis, and indeed cognitive impacts are common. And sometimes these symptoms can precede seizure onset. It's fascinating. So we have to be very aware of those things. And this is kind of, I've gone into this slide now, but the epilepsy affects all of our brain networks, not just one little bit. And yeah.
Sorry to interrupt, your slides are not
Yeah,
being...
your slides are not visible, Tori, I think.
Oh, really? I'm
Yep.
sharing them. Hang on. I am sharing them. Hang on, let me do this again. Or I thought I was. Do you want me to start from the beginning then, or not?
No, you can go from the slide which you have been talking on. That should be
Okay.
good.
Yeah.
Can you see it now?
Yeah. Now it's visible. Yes.
Okay, hang on.
Go on the slideshow. Yeah.
Yeah. There we go. Okay.
Yes, perfect. Yeah.
Okay, great. Please interrupt me at any point because I get passionate and then I'll just keep on talking. So just give me a poke. So my story in brief, I had my first symptoms. I had febrile status epilepticus, aged 10 months. And by status epilepticus, I mean the seizure went on for at least an hour. So that is strongly correlated with development of an epilepsy later on. And that may or may not be the case with my epilepsy. I don't know. But what's frustrating for myself is I didn't find out about that status epilepticus until I was about 30. Can you believe it? So it was stigma within my family. Nobody told me, which is just crazy. Navigating disease progression and needs has been a real obstacle for myself, and partly because it wasn't believed I had an epilepsy by my family, or by some of my family, not all of them. And so it was hard for me to seek or ask for help. And that was also partly because of familial abuse. So it was very difficult for me just to say, I'm really depressed, I'm really sad, my seizures are happening, what do I do? I ended up, my seizures got worse and worse and worse as I got older. I was diagnosed when I was 10, but as I mentioned, they started a lot earlier than that. And then I got to 32 before I had surgery. So from diagnosis to surgery was 21, 22 years, which is just ridiculous. And then I was in psychiatric hospital after that. So I wish that could have happened and that I'd have gotten earlier help with my seizures and the psychiatric morbidities. And that's one of my key messages. We need to be helping people sooner and look beyond seizures. And today, as I kind of implied already, I am a researcher, podcaster, and global advocate. I will tell you some more about some of the amazing people I've interviewed in a few slides. Okay. So why stories matter in epilepsy? We need to hear from people who experience the epilepsies. And I say people plural because epilepsy affects people so differently, whether that's, again, we stereotypically look at the seizures. Of course, they can be very different. The psychiatric morbidities can be very different. Lots of people have movement disorders. We have more and more people of older age developing an epilepsy. We need to be honest about or feel comfortable being honest about everything that affects us. We need to be able to say, anybody can have an epilepsy at any time. And that is the truth. And it's not dependent upon your race, your culture. It's not related to evil spirits. And that's a topic all of itself that I know lots of people still believe that. But we need to somehow get around that, or plan to how to get around that. And stigma, we always talk about stigma from the outside, but actually self-stigma is huge. It's such an issue with so many people with an epilepsy. We think we are less than, and we feel embarrassed to talk about it. And I'm a very strange person. I've never felt embarrassed to talk about it, but I think that's because I'm stubborn, and also because I love science. I love and value empirical evidence, and epilepsy doesn't define me. I'm not epileptic. I have an epilepsy. It's not part of who I am, but it really significantly affects my life. And there's a real difference between those two ways of looking at it. And when we share stories in a positive, constructive way, it's not just good for ourselves, but good for empowering other people affected. I've even had feedback, not just from people with epilepsy, but also caregivers as well. They've never heard a story quite so candid before than that from myself. And they really, really appreciate it. And it also helps people realize that they're not alone. They're not the only people affected. And then also the stories, I think, are very important. It's very important for us to include science along with it, and the latest discoveries. But for us to be very careful that we don't just believe the first things we read, that we try and find confirmation or lack of confirmation, because we don't want confirmation bias, of what we've discovered, and see, is this information that is credible? And is it backed up by other studies? Then I think that we can share that information as being factual. Having said that, what I found is lots of people, and we're all guilty, certainly to a degree, will feel that if we heard something 20 years ago, it's true now, today. And we know as clinicians and researchers, that is not always the case. And I think within patient communities, that message needs to be spread as well. Sorry. Okay, so having lived experience influence government policy is really important. What I often say to officials is that epilepsy doesn't just affect individuals and families, it affects the wider public. They just don't know it. Because, for instance, if we're less likely to work, there's less contribution to taxes, which affects everybody else. If our epilepsy and our seizures aren't controlled well, we're more likely to go to A&E, which costs the taxpayer more. We're less likely to contribute to breeding, to literally having children. There are many, many aspects I think that people need to be aware of, and we need to communicate this with people, with governments and policymakers, because that shows them that it's worth helping us. It's worth contributing to our quality of life. It's worth helping us to have fewer seizures, to have fewer psychiatric morbidities, to contribute to helping our lives when we have movement disorders and things like that. And so perspectives of patients and families, I've heard directly from researchers themselves. I've even had them cry in a big meeting when we shared our stories, and they would cry and say, do you know what, I relate to that as well. And it's a real motivator for researchers. And I wasn't necessarily expecting that before, but it's so lovely to see. And they've just said, God, you make me really do what I'm supposed to do. So now previously, we used to have pharma kind of at the top, researchers, and then clinicians, and then little old patients at the end. We didn't really have any influence at all. And this is, by the way, this is still the case in many countries, in many parts of countries, but I'm kind of speaking more from the UK side. But I'm very conscious things are different globally. Currently, this is where I am. So I'm kind of feel a bit trapped in the middle. So I'm communicating with researchers, with clinicians, with medtech, as you can see at the top, a bit with pharma. You have to be very careful, obviously, and then directly with the patients. And you can see they've got a bigger role now. But I don't think things should be this complicated. What I hope and foresee for the future is that we have the patients' families at the top, because they are who we are trying to help. They should be able to communicate directly with researchers and, of course, clinicians. And I think there should be some sort of like central hub that makes it easy for all of us to communicate. That's why I put a brain in the middle. So call that whatever you want, a bit of AI, some management, whatever it might be. But we should be able to communicate more effectively. There shouldn't be so many silos, because we know that leads to lack of access to care. It leads to lack of awareness of what's available. It leads to, I mean, we know that drugs can take like 10 years to get to market, but it extends that time. And also it means that you, as clinicians, don't have us giving you good feedback and motivating you. So this is what I hope the future to look like. So when I created Epilepsy Sparks, so my concept, as I said kind of near the beginning, is to bridge the communication gaps between clinicians, researchers, the people with the epilepsy and their families. Because I know what it's like to, even though I've been fascinated by and loved science my whole life, I didn't know about any of this until my 30s. And that's just crazy to me. So it's all about empowering parties through education. And I don't say parties slightly, because people traditionally say empowering patients through education. But actually, we need to empower everybody through education. None of us can assume that we know everything, because we don't. I'm trying to translate complex scientific stories and scientific projects into layperson's terms to get everybody else excited and to encourage to what's the word? See, this is my epilepsy talking. I forget words. To motivate people working in the field. Now, just for perspective, we have up to 12,000 downloads a month on our podcast. Majority of the listeners, viewers are on YouTube, but yeah, there's the podcast itself. And of course, people also look at the website and check out our transcript. So for some people who don't have access to YouTube, they don't have great Wi-Fi, they can just go and read it there. Half our guests, half our listeners are clinicians, researchers, and half are people with epilepsy and caregivers, with a huge section from India. I wasn't expecting that, but heaps and heaps are from India. So I'm delighted to say that. So why global communication matters? Well, I didn't put this on here, but first of all, this is a selfish reason. I get bored of just the UK, so bored. I think it was because maybe I traveled a lot when I was a kid, but I have to have influence from everywhere. But putting that to one side, I believe, and this is actually supported by somebody on one of my recent episodes. I'll share it in a moment. But we need to standardize care and understanding across countries. That's within countries too, because, for instance, even in the UK, people have to move to cities to get the best care that they can. If I'd have stayed within the rural area I used to live in, I would probably literally be dead now, because I wouldn't have gotten the care and help that I needed. But so I say individual countries, but across the world, we need that. We need increasing awareness of diagnostics, treatments, and safety. And that's awareness amongst, yes, the people with epilepsy and their families, but also clinicians. I would say especially clinicians who don't specialize in epilepsy. I've seen many neurologists across my lifetime, and they were not specialists, and they were quite dismissive because they didn't know what else was out there. And I can imagine that's happening a lot around the world. Well, I know it is. I've been told by many patients in different countries. And we need to highlight the disparities of people. Like, it's not a pity party saying, oh, it's really, really unfair, even though it is, or saying, oh, please help us. Let's work together. And it's a constructive, fun thing. It's really motivating for all of us. And different cultures can learn from each other. We shouldn't be nervous or scared about it. So these are the universal needs across countries, the things that we do have in similar. We all need to provide people with an accurate diagnosis and timely treatment. So they shouldn't be waiting over 20 years for surgery, but they also shouldn't be waiting 9 years for anti-seizure medication. Again, as I mentioned, we need the education for all parties. We need people, because this is an issue in high-income countries too, by the way. So we need to people to understand, and so first understand and then acknowledge what epilepsy is. It's not just seizures. It affects you between seizures. It impacts every part of your life. And there's a huge variability into how people are impacted and to what severity. We need the support for the families, the caregivers, and the community networks. As I've sort of said before, the epilepsy doesn't just affect the person with it. And in fact, I would say, and I know this is a bit, should I say it? But I think in many cases, the epilepsy can be worse for the families because especially if the patient grew up with epilepsy, even though it's terrible, they don't know any different. And the families will see their children or their loved ones seizing or being really depressed, and they don't know what to do. And that's awful for them. So we cannot disregard the needs of those people as well. We need quick access to psychiatric care. We know that the sooner the better, just like with seizure management, the sooner the better we can help people. The sooner we can help them, the better. And the less likely it is for their health to get worse and worse over time. But then finally, we need to recognize that while many needs are similar, like I've just mentioned, there are massive differences between countries and the context of the countries. We cannot apply exactly the same rules to everybody. So as I mentioned before, I was just going to, this was this week's episode with Nicola Specchio, based in Rome in Italy. And he's the new ILAE Europe lead. And we discussed strengthening epilepsy care across both high-income countries and low to middle-income countries. So we do speak of that. We can't just focus on Europe and North America and Australasia. We all have to work together. And we need to focus on ethical, practical initial collaboration. So how can we do it? What works? And how can we do it in a good way and in a way that's respectful to all parties? And I think I really want to point out, because people often presume it's the opposite. I think that people in high-income countries need to realize what they can learn from people in low to middle-income countries. I strongly believe that. Because, for instance, I know that things that you told me about, Bindu, you just do so much that we generally don't do, for instance, in the UK, and it's so inspiring. So I think we need to learn more about those things. And he also speaks about how we reinforce shared global needs, again, without a pity party narrative. So this is just some of the examples of the impacts that my organization has made, and this has been some of the feedback. So listeners of the podcast and readers of the website have told me that they understand epilepsy more. And not all these people have an epilepsy either. Sometimes it's been the caregivers or friends of people or employers of people. But yes, more often the people with the diagnosis, and they're like, oh my God, I didn't know that. How did I not know that? And I've had clinicians using episodes to educate their colleagues. We've even had some episodes where they've translated the transcription into their local language so that more people within their country can actually listen or view it. And it's been very similar with some people with epilepsy that will refer the episodes to the people they know, say, look, understand this. This is what I'm experiencing. This is what I need your help with. Just in support, not pity, but just some support. I provide information that I think is empowering. We often even have a giggle during our episodes. It's not all, as I said before, it's an awful, awful disease, but we're still allowed to giggle sometimes, and also I've been raising awareness of the research, therefore hope, that's out there for future generations, raising awareness of the symptoms of epileptogenesis and raising awareness of real experiences of people. Not so you don't just have to read in a book oh, this is what happened to this person, and these are the statistics amongst the general population. But I'm getting people to understand what it can literally be like. It's not just about seizures. It's not just about trying to get people to work. It's not just about having people do yoga. It's about looking at the whole spectrum of a person's life. And only by doing that can we improve their quality of life. So as I mentioned before, it's really important for globally for high income countries as well to recognize the differences between needs and how we can all support each other. So for instance, we know that inaccurate beliefs are more common in low to middle income countries. Culturally, clinically, and politically, it's not just amongst patients. There are preventable causes that can be more common in low to middle income countries. I mean, I always say that, for instance, in the UK, although we moan it's wet and it's too humid, because it's not too hot, we don't have lots of specific diseases from mosquitoes, for instance, that could lead to DEEs and things like that. The financial and geographical barriers. I sometimes think that in Europe, for instance, we're all close together and there's good transport. So we can literally go to another country within an hour in some cases. That's not possible in many larger low to middle income countries. I know one person based in Uganda, and she has to travel to another African country to see her clinician. And I'm like, well, luckily for her, she can afford to do that. But what's it like for everybody who can't afford? And they're the majority. And we shouldn't have to do that. There should be there should be just far improved access to care. The gaps in policy and governments, I believe, as I've been told from many people in these countries, the government just doesn't get it. They just don't understand the needs or care about the needs of people. And often it's because of stigma that's even held at government level. So all of this leads to a lack of clinical and social support, which I've experienced in the UK too, but of course that is much more common in low to middle income countries. And there's such a low number of specialist clinicians. After speaking to some people in India and Pakistan, for instance, it doesn't compare to how much we moan about the lack of access to care in the UK. It just doesn't compare. And we need to address this. And I hope you notice I'm saying we, because I think people often say, oh, you need to address that. No, I think we as a world need to address this. And then there's a diagnosis and treatment gap. If we don't get accurate diagnosis in countries, then how are we going to know how to treat them? But then if we don't have access to treatment, or our access to certain drugs, for instance, is so limited, how can we effectively treat these people and improve their quality of life? So here we go. This is where I make people blush, maybe. So I just wanted to talk about advocacy in India. So coming first, obviously, is the amazing Bindu Menon, who's been quite one of our guests this year. Please check her out to to be inspired, I think is the word. More recently, we had Gagneep Singh. We're talking about his work with the ILAE and the training available. And that training, by the way, is available to people in any country around the world and is available in things like Hindi and many languages in India. AJ Asrana, and then podcast guests who are equally amazing, but unfortunately not now in India. So Rohit Shankar, he's based over here. Farouk Sheikh, he's based in Australia, as is Parthavi Ravat. So something I'm trying to do, and I don't think this is very common when it comes to awareness, is to have people from around the world featuring. Then we get proper insight into what epilepsy means to people and what the needs of people around the world are. So I'm working with individuals when it comes to patient public involvement. So reaching out specifically to people in India. Lots of you will probably know Vinay Jani. He's very popular, quite famous in India when it comes to advocacy. So if you don't know of him, please reach out to him. He's a top guy. We have a Instagram live about once every 2 weeks. We recognize both the shared global needs and specific local challenges. And I just try and encourage greater involvement of clinicians and people with epilepsy in research. So if anybody is interested in that, please get in touch with me. So whether you be a clinician, a researcher yourself, so you might need people to be involved, or you're a person with epilepsy, just please get in touch with me because there's so much we can do and achieve together. So methods of advocacy that I've used and used today, of course, my podcast, the PPI roles that I hold. So the ones I have at the moment are in the UK and in Portugal, but we've had patients and caregivers involved have been from, as I mentioned, India, the US, from mainland European countries, the UK itself, Australia, Indonesia, South America, because it's much more interesting that way. And I think we get a much better, deep overview of what the needs of people with an epilepsy are. I do lots of public speaking like this, I guess, and outreach. And then I'm also working with pharma now, obviously in a very legal, restricted way. But I'm doing this so that, and I'm working with clinicians on this because the pharma need to know what the priorities are for patients. Sometimes they think it's just about seizure control. Obviously, that's very often the priority, especially in people who are having, 100 seizures a day, for instance. But the more and more we talk to patients, you find out, well, there's other things that I need help with, other symptoms of my epilepsy. I'm involved with medical technology, which is really cool, really interesting. It's a growing field, but generally they need much better insight into how they can help their target market, which is us. But they need to balance that between the needs of the researchers, clinicians, and the needs of the service users, i.e. patients and caregivers. And then I'm involved in policy engagement and awareness days. But it's always with a positive spin. Maybe for a bit of a selfish reason, I experienced depression myself, and so I can't be dealing with more depression. So evidence-based messaging is really important. We know that in many groups of patients, it's incorrect information spreads like wildfire, especially if it confirms our thoughts that we have already. So I'm encouraging people to value empirical evidence. First of all, they say, what is empirical evidence? And I'll explain, this is the information you should be relying upon. I am a science communicator, so using science and the exciting stuff behind it to inform public communication. Obviously, as you can imagine, that's very tiring because how many papers do you guys read a week, right? It's a lot of effort and time and energy. I really avoid the sensationalism because there's a lot of that for multiple diseases. It's epilepsy, but also many other things that will get attention and will be good for SEO. That's what kind of seems to be very popular. But I just try to look at the long game and try to just provide information that's real and not go down that rabbit hole of what's just trendy because it's often inaccurate. And then I am also trying to support clinicians by getting the people affected by the epilepsy to use accurate language and vice versa, to be honest. And I don't know how many of you know of it, but there's a relatively recent, this year, update in how to describe what were formerly focal aware seizures. And now we talk about focal consciousness instead. And we've actually got an episode out on that very soon, if anybody's interested. And again, this is for a selfish reason because I really love just giving people a voice. But we need to amplify clinician and researcher voices. Traditionally, as I mentioned before, it was just a bunch of silos. Nobody heard about what was going on. But researchers need motivation and need to know how valuable they are. So, but they also need to see the value of multidisciplinary perspectives, right? So it's not just about what goes on in the lab. It's not just about basic science. It's about communicating that to the outside world. But the outside world needs to know about that because they don't generally. And why would they? Because we're not taught about it, but we need to know what's going on behind the scenes. I showcase breakthroughs, but also I'm very careful to explain a breakthrough is a breakthrough, but it doesn't mean it's going to affect patients right now. And it might not affect them at all, but we need to get excited about what's going on. So whether that's imaging, surgery, neuromodulation, whether we're looking at qualitative research. That's very important as well. We're generally focused on quantitative, of course, incredibly important, but more and more I think that we're looking at qualitative, which is important to see how we can improve quality of life. I'm trying to get researchers to celebrate global innovation. So I'm very lucky now I'm involved in international studies. And that's a really cool thing because we can get people to be motivated by each other, learn new techniques, be inspired by one another. And yeah. And I'm really trying to give a voice and credit to the characters that aren't so high profile. We all know that there are some people we see all the time on LinkedIn or on whichever platform, and they're achieving so much, which is brilliant. But there are some people who are just, they don't have that personality to be loud and out there all the time. So I'm really trying to give them a voice and encourage them. We shouldn't wait for researchers to go from their PhD and then wait 20 years before they're recognized for their work, which is traditionally what's been happening. So the future of epilepsy, what do I see? So precision medicine, I think is, well, it's kind of where we are, but it's really where we're going. Improved access to diagnostics. I'm working on a project at the moment where I can't say too much, but we're talking about providing services for EEG remotely. And so you can just send something in the post to somebody, they can do it themselves, and then they send it back and the data can be analyzed by somebody 1,000 miles away or 5,000 miles away. I think that's can be a really good way for us to help people in rural areas actually. So as I've mentioned quite a lot, the stigma, we are getting somewhere. We are getting somewhere. As awful as things are, compare it to 100 years ago, things aren't as bad. I often think if I was alive 200-300 years ago, I could have been burnt as a witch. So at least that's not happening, generally speaking. There are still occurrences, but they're not as common. And I think that we're going to have more and more patients, constructive patients, who are going to be there in every stage of care and research so that we can positively influence and encourage and motivate clinicians and researchers in what they do. And don't get me wrong, it can be a scary thing, I think, for many researchers because they're not trained in that, they're not used to it, and they're just scared that something's going to go wrong. They'll say the wrong thing, or they get people upset, or they often, unfortunately, think it'll be a waste of time. And so I think in the future, this is starting, but we're going to get more and more people to realize this is a cool thing. It's a motivational thing, and it's going to help us to be more bang on with the work that we actually do. So where can we actually work together globally? So we can do joint educational initiatives. I guess I'm already trying to do that through the podcast and my research. We need to share the research in accessible formats. And I give you an example of this. So one of my guests from Mexico, we were talking about how the tribes in rural areas of Mexico, they didn't speak English. They don't speak other more prominent world languages. There are something like, I don't know if it's like 80 languages within the country. So we need to be sharing research and information to educate them in their own language. How do we do that? We need to figure it out. And then again, we need more clinician, researcher, and people with an epilepsy collaboration for public understanding. So not just the research, but for getting out there and saying, this is what we're doing together. How cool is this? And this is what the epilepsies are. And I think that's a really important point, actually. I refer generally to epilepsy as epilepsies because there are so many different types and they're so diverse. And always smiling and having fun because it's an empowering thing for all parties. So key takeaways, clinicians, researchers, people with epilepsy and families, we do have shared goals, or when we come together, we can establish our shared goals. Accessible science, empirical evidence application, all of that improves outcomes. Advocacy must be ethical, inclusive, and cool. I did say I had from research from one company, we actually applied for the grant together, which was my first grant, which was really cool. And excuse me, they said, goodness, Tori, we've never seen a PPI lead kind of act the way that you do. And I said, mate, we have to have a giggle sometimes. We have to be able to relate. It doesn't have to be overly formal at all times. If we look at a general workplace and it's always really stiff, and a bit scary. We don't like that. So it has to be the same for when we have regular people involved in our research. So thank you for listening. You can contact me via the websites listed, so toryrobinson.com or epilepsysparks.com. And I'm also available on all of the social media channels you can see, so LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, Blue Sky, Threads, and TikTok. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Tori. That was so heartfelt and so inspiring. So thank you for your hope, that strength that you bring to the epilepsy community. I have heard in one of your talks that you speak so fluently, saying that epilepsy is the choice, but how you live with it. And that's what you have been showing us today. I also like the word "we" that you use so frequently, and you explain, and that's how we all should be moving. And India is a difficult place as well, Tori. We have 22, I suppose, official languages, more than 100 major languages, and more than 1,000 other languages.
Dialects.
That's just like over the top, man, isn't it? That's just like
Dialects.
wild.
Yeah, and the pronunciation that goes.
Yeah.
So we have a couple of questions here. One question is there in the chat box there.
yeah.
Ashutosh, who has been with us for the IGAP workshop also during the last Indian Epilepsy Association IES conference which we had. Wants to ask, programs global and national making, are they making the anti-seizure medications available to epilepsy patients? Are there any?
There's one organization I know of, and I know there'll be more, but there's one called the Roe Foundation. So it's like capital R, capital O, capital W, and their purpose is to provide anti-seizure medications to low to middle income countries. It's not everything, but that is their purpose and what they're doing. So if you want to get in touch with them, or if you would like details of them from me, then please, I can give those to you.
I suppose one could reach out, and we have our district hospitals who are quite, the supply of drugs is uninterrupted in most of the centers, but then I can't say in all of them, but then most of them, and we may not have every medication available, but then most of them we have. So that is one way also our persons with epilepsy can reach out. So Tori, you speak so openly about epilepsy, and that's so warm, and your communication techniques are different.
Oh.
So what is it that you would want to tell? So many other advocates are there. So what is that communication technique that you use to convert the stigma into curiosity and empathy? And we have young advocates with us. We have young warriors with us. As I mentioned in the last IGAP, we had a whole session and how we can translate this into advocacy. And what mistakes do you think that the new advocates do commonly make, and how we can avoid them?
Okay, well, I think...
So in short, how we can have many Tories.
Oh, oh my goodness, don't say that. You really don't want that. But I would say the first thing, and this doesn't apply to everybody, but it applies to many people, is you need to realize how much you don't know. So, for instance, the Dunning-Kruger effect, I expect most people haven't heard of it, but it's a kind of famous thing where these guys created a paper in the 90s, and it showed how the less you know, the less you realize you don't know. And then you learn some, and then you're like, oh my gosh, I know hardly anything. And you become really underconfident because you realize how ignorant you are. That's kind of where I am most of the time. And then you learn more and more, and then you're like, okay, maybe I know quite a lot, but I still realize how much I don't know, but you're confident about it. And I think that many of us, and I certainly used to be, and I think sometimes still am, to be honest, what I used to be is I didn't realize how little I knew. So therefore, I just thought I could talk about epilepsy openly and educate other people, because epilepsy was just seizures. Even though I knew that I felt terrible myself, I wasn't taught that epilepsy was far more diverse than that. I didn't know about all the potential treatment options. I didn't know about the research that was out there. And because I didn't know it, I thought I was spreading accurate information, but I wasn't entirely. So I would say what we really need to do is realize that we don't know a lot. I would say then we need to try and learn more and more about the epilepsies. Really good platforms can be, for instance, I hope Epilepsy Sparks can be the International League Against Epilepsy. There's a new podcast called What the F? It's like EF, and that's kind of much more friendly, easygoing. And it can really help, although it's frustrating, if we're not familiar with it, is to learn academic language. So it's taken me, I think, about 6, 7, 8 years to kind of become au fait with it, because then we can understand more about the disease, the research into the disease, and then we can more effectively communicate accurate or provide accurate information about it. I would also say to people that it's okay to reach out to clinicians and researchers. Most of them are really cool and really, warm your heart, like yourself, Indy, and are open to working together. So maybe rather than just being involved with other advocates and people on the ground, maybe think also, let's communicate with researchers and clinicians too. Let's build those bridges between parties. Let's not encourage separation, because that's what we've traditionally done. And I would love it if we could all just work together as one party. I think we'd do a lot better. I would also say we advocates need to learn from each other. So we can be equally guilty of being siloed. And so there's loads of motivating people all around the world. These other advocates don't have to be in your country. For instance, Vinay Jani, who I work with, he's amazing. He's a really fun, cool guy. Hence, we do our regular Instagram lives. So I would do that as well. But also importantly, I would say be easy on yourself, because it can be exhausting having to constantly go on and explain the same things, to deal with stigma that is still out there, can be really like heartbreaking sometimes. So look after number one, because it's just like on a flight on a plane. They always say put your own vest top on first, or your life jacket on first, or take the oxygen to yourself first before helping anybody else. And I think that's really important in this work as well. Oh, I can't hear you. Sorry.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Tori. We have several Indian Epilepsy Association chapters across the country, and Saman Association is one big association at Mumbai. Asmita, actually, Carol has a hand raised up. I don't know whether if there's a possibility for her to be given, she needs to talk.
Yeah,
Is
sure.
that
I
possible?
visited them a few years ago, actually. So they were brilliant. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Asmita, can we have Carol? Can she put in a question, or does she need to type it down there? Asmita?
She can type over there.
Okay. So Carol, I suppose the webinar does not give, you need to type down, and then they do wonderful work. As you already know, Tori. And yes, so
Yeah.
there is so much of work coming out there, so much of stigma, discrimination, everything they work on. And Carol, I think if you'd like to put down something, could you put it in the chat box so that I can ask Tori about it? Or else you can just connect to Tori in person with the email IDs and this. And as Tori said that you have already been there. While she's typing, I would just like to put in my last question to you, if Sadesh has this. We are looking at a future of epilepsy care and patient empowerment, and now it's a world of artificial intelligence. Tori, where do you see the biggest opportunities for digital tools? Where do you think the apps, the wearables, and AIs, do you really think that it's going to empower?
I do, but I see several sides of. So some people are really nervous about it because they're taking all our data and all this time. Oh, I see Carol there. Hi as well. Yeah, taking all our data, and they get worried about it and how it's going to be used. But I think we're getting a bit better in terms of realizing actually it can be really useful. For instance, this is really good for my exercise. But we do need to be careful, especially with access to data. Who can access that? But I think we need to embrace it. It's not going to disappear. And if we have laws that are strictly implemented to protect data, that's a great thing. Do you know what, though, actually? and this is just my personal opinion, in some ways it's gone a bit too far, the laws of AI in Europe. Sometimes I feel this, sometimes I don't. But when I do feel it's the case, it's like so hard to get patients and families involved in the development of AI, because everyone's worried, oh, we don't want bias and we don't want to expose personal information, or it's generally the laws that prevent more and more patients being involved. But I would tell anybody here, embrace it, approach organizations that are developing AI tools and say, how can I help? Because I am your market, I am your consumer, I'm your client, right? So you need to be involved. Additionally, I would say demand to be paid for this. What's really common is that organizations think that, oh, well, you're just the patient and therefore you're lucky to be involved with us. But no, without you, they make no money anyway, right? And you are an expert in AI. Well, you're an expert in needs, I should say. So present yourself as a professional that you are, approach these AI companies, and just, if they're getting paid, you should be paid, right? So, but yeah, embrace AI. That's the only way we can go forward. But also, I would say, be careful of, it's not always accurate, right? Not always yet. It takes a lot of work and time to improve accuracy. Just for instance, this is not medical, but ChatGPT, some of the rubbish it tells me, I'll just be like, dude, are you serious? So we have to be very cautious as well. And as you can imagine, especially in medicine.
True. Yeah. Judiciously use the tool, because it's going to stay with us. So you need to know the implications, where you use it, how you use it, and go forward. I suppose Carol was given the talking right. I can't see her now.
Can you hear me? That's okay.
I can.
Okay.
Hiya.
Hi, Tori. Wonderful seeing you here, narrating to all of us in India.
Oh, God.
Yeah. Congratulations. Really appreciate what you do.
Thank you. Thank you. I hope we can meet properly soon. I would love to visit India again and see all of you. It would be amazing. Most like such lovely, warm experience. And I can tell you, after my trip, I have just been promoting India, I have to say. So thank you.
Yeah. What I wanted to ask you is that in my experience working with people with epilepsy, largely those coming to Samman, of course, they're very well educated and stuff, but the main complaint they have, the adults with epilepsy, is that they find it so difficult to get jobs. Is it the same in your country? And of course, over here, there's no disability allowance or pension or anything of the sort. And that is their main complaint.
I can understand that. Actually, well, we do have benefits over here, as you know. We do have pensions, so we have something to fall back on. Although the benefits are not easy to access, and it's been in the news, and I almost had to go to court to get support from the government because it was that hard. But what my life, whenever, obviously I'm self-employed now, but when I was employed by other organizations, I would always be very open with it. Now, I know that there's less stigma here, but I would do it in a special way, and that is, I would never talk about it in an interview because it's not relevant to, well, first of all, I would not apply for a job I couldn't do. So if I thought that my seizures and mood would not enable me to do the job, ethically, I just didn't apply for it because I think that's wrong. And then secondly, I would apply for jobs with large companies. So because with large companies, especially corporates, if that's accessible to people, they have many more sort of rules and regulations in place to try and not discriminate. So I knew that that would make things easier. And then, as I was saying initially, I didn't talk about my epilepsy in an interview because none of your business. Like, I'm not even with you yet. Why would I tell you that? Because it wouldn't affect my ability to do the job. Then once I've signed a contract, then I would tell them on the first day, by the way, I have an epilepsy. This is what you would need to do if I had a seizure. In my case, I probably wouldn't, but if I did, But I would say it with a smile, with confidence, with knowledge about my disease, and then say, okay, I'm kind of bored now. Can I just get on with my job? And then I would just do my job. So I think a huge part of that was just confidence. You know, I meet many
That's
patients who just
exactly
say,
what we tell our people also to do. And the way they speak is so important, how confident they are.
right, I think we should practice with each other or encourage patients to practice. Do you
We do
reckon?
have that.
Do you do that? Oh, great. Does it help them?
I hope so. I think it's a process. If you have, as you say, and I agree with you, that self-stigma is so high, family stigma is so high. So that stigma needs to go first.
I could not agree more. My dad did not believe I had epilepsy until I'm my 30s, because only then did he see me have a tonic-clonic. But he was so, that can't happen to my child, da, da, da. And it's so damaging to the family member with the epilepsy. So yeah, I totally. And then sometimes maybe encourage people. You can't make people be stubborn. Maybe like, I'm just gonna leave this ridiculousness. It's easy for me to say, right? And also, don't get me wrong, I do still feel some stigma inside because of the way I was brought up, because of society, because even though I was just say, well, come on, this is what it is, but deep down inside, I still feel it. And
When you come to my age, you want anymore. I used to
sorry?
be you. I said, when you reach my age, you want anymore.
Yeah. I don't think you're that much older than me, But yeah,
and like you, I too was diagnosed around the same time, 10, 11, or started treatment and diagnosed around that time. And largely what we go through as children is just, adhere to what our parents tell us. And it's only in the 30s that we really do have a voice. So you're not very different. It is only in the 30s that we realize stuff and we try and we improve on ourselves and see the options. When you're young, you just do what your parents leave you to. And
yeah.
but of course now I think it will be better because children are so tech savvy. So they are going to use AI, they're going to use technology to get all the information they want far before we had it. So
I agree, but I would say
to improve.
I agree, but I also would say we need to make sure that the information they access is accurate as well. That's a big thing, I think, and that's why I think that we also
so you go more into research, the research papers and the research.
Yeah.
First of all, the interest should be there, and if it is, yes, you can access and you can figure out and you can get the right advice. Yes.
Yeah. Wouldn't it be a good what do you think of this idea? I would love it if we could have, maybe AI could do this. There could be an automatic translation of a paper into layperson's terms.
So
And
I would read the synopsis first, the summary, which gives you quite a, all that you need to know, basically, unless you want to go deeper.
I know for us, but I know lots of people who have cognitive deficits and they couldn't do that. How do we help those people? That's who I'm thinking, because those are the people who don't attend often don't attend support groups, who are left at home, who are so depressed they don't know what to do, and they might have not done well at school. How do we help those people, those who don't have a voice? That's what I want to do.
So such conditions
a difficult task, but the
graphic.
IT and all the associations are trying to do their bit to help out.
Great.
Yes,
Thank you so much, Carol, for joining us. And Tori, thank you so much for your insights. I suppose it has brought in new avenues to how we can collaborate from some of people across in India with you, and they can reach out to you. Siddesh, is there anything else from your side? Otherwise, we'll wind up.
Yeah, just gratitude from my side. I mean, she's doing an amazing job, and there are people like you must be knowing Tiffany Kairos, who has been
Oh, of course,
vocal
yes.
about epilepsy. Yeah, and so I think more collaborations with people like you from people of low or middle income group countries like us to spread awareness would be the way forward. And ma'am herself is doing fantastic work. I need not stress more on that. So I think more people like us should be talking about it, collaborating more. And like AI, there could be apps which could remind patients to take medicines on time, because that is the most common cause of having breakthrough seizures, because miss doses or
Yeah.
they feel they have been cured, so to say.
Mm.
So there are many things in which AI can pitch in and help patients and caregivers.
So,
Totally
Sudesh, we
agree.
have our epilepsy help app, which
Yes.
can be free to download across the country. I'm not sure about, I keep asking if anybody from outside the country also downloads and tells me whether it is working. Tori,
Okay.
if possible, do it for
Oh,
me.
yes, I'll do that. What's it called again? Or send me the link and I'll try and download it.
Yeah, I'll do that. Yeah. So thank you so much, everyone, all the attendees who were there with us. I suppose there are around 35, 40, and many or more on the YouTube, and we'll have a complete number from Asmita. We thank the Indian Academy of Neurology for giving us this platform to reach out with Tori and have a beautiful discussion, learning from her, her insights, her challenges, and how she overcame that and brought it out into a global field. Thank you so much once again, Tori, for sharing your time, and everybody across here. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you for the motivation and inspiring me as well, personally. Bye.
Thank you.